Wednesday, so that means it is hump day. So are you the sort of person that understands that hump day means that we are halfway through the week? So this is the hump that we need to get over? Or are you one of those people who thinks hump day represents something a little less family friendly? I don't know. I can't tell you. The only thing I know for certain is the Daily Dope is in the air. Howdy, 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 gang. Jeff McAleer back once again, and I am your host here on the Daily Dope, as well as the Grand Poobah of thegaminggang.com. And yes, I see we've got Robert Moffat in chat. He's one of our viewers, always watches the show, especially on Wednesdays. He's a big war gamer, and he's also a Patreon, or I should say patron, over at Patreon. First thing I'm going to mention, and Robert's watching live, show almost started a little bit late because for some strange reason the sound was out of sync again. I don't know, everything's been cool. I always test it before I go live. For some strange reason today, with the same programs I normally have open, it was off. The sync was off a little bit. So if this is out of sync, Robert, do me a favor, chime in on chat and let me know. So as you can tell, there is chat available here on the Daily Dope. It's through Twitch as well as YouTube. It's not on the screen because that helps me keep some of the trolls at bay. So anyway, it is Wednesday, so that means it is War Game Wednesday, and I have a jam-packed show. First of all, I will be looking and reviewing, I should say looking at and reviewing Old School Tactical Volume 2 from my pal Mark H. Walker over at Flying Pig Games. So that is going to be coming up. I do want to point out that it is not going to be like an entire playthrough. I'm going to kind of focus on some of the things that are a bit different with Old School Tactical Volume 2, The Western Front, 1944 to 1945, if I want to be official with the title. But gonna give you my impressions of the game, and if it's gonna appeal to longtime veterans of wargaming. Is it a good game to introduce wargaming to family and friends? I don't know. You have to stay tuned and find out, because I have news to cover. I have a giveaway winner to announce, and then I'm gonna dip into the mailbag real quick for an item that I just wanted to kind of chat about. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome aboard. Be sure to subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel, and if you dig the video, give it a nice little thumbs up. I always appreciate that. Appreciate all the subscriptions. Plus, don't forget, you've got thegaminggang.com. There is tons and tons of stuff at thegaminggang.com that just isn't on the Daily Dope. Alrighty, so settling in a little bit, because as I mentioned, I was getting everything ready for the show, and I was like, oh, okay, it's about 10 minutes before I go live. That's when I do my little sound test, and my assumption was going to be, oh yeah, everything's going to be in sync, and then, nope. What can you say? Hey, at least it's not as bad as couple of early shows back in December when the sound was way out of sync and everything looked good on my end, and then once it rendered on YouTube, it was sort of like watching a Japanese Godzilla flick with a really bad dubbing. Okay, so anyway, so I've got a lot of news today. So I'm going to jump into the news. I've got 5 items. I really wanted to go heavy on wargaming news today because it is Wargame Wednesday. But the first item that is on the agenda is not wargame related, but yet again, it's another new game coming from Renegade Games Studios. I swear they went through that like week and a half where nothing was going on, and suddenly, boom, all these announcements are coming out. There's even one more game that Renegade has on the horizon that I will talk about tomorrow. Anyway, so it's a new family game, and In it, you'll be collecting trash in outer space. Yes, it's true, you will be collecting garbage in outer space in junk orbit. And I've got the dope. Space. The final junkyard. Good thing one planet's trash is another planet's treasure. You're a captain of your own scavenging spaceship, picking up space junk and transporting it to any city that will take it. Launch your junk cargo out of your airlock to propel your ship. Race to deliver your cargo as you navigate the orbits of nearby planets and moons. It's astrodynamics for fun and profit. Renegade Games Studios is excited to announce Junk Orbit, an extraterrestrial game from designer Daniel Solis. Blast off in this fresh pick-up and deliver set collection game with unique movement mechanics. Junk Orbit is a fantastic and very accessible space delivery game that I'm excited for both families and gamers to play, says Dan Bojanowski. Sorry if I got that wrong, Dan. Senior producer at Renegade Games Studios. Daniel Solis has done a great job of creating a game with interesting movement and decision-making with plenty of fun nods to sci-fi pop culture. Junk Orbit has tons of replayability with advanced sides for all boards and extra ship powers to try out. The game features captain your own salvage spaceship to collect junk. Carefully navigate your ship using the gravitational pull of the planets. Deliver your cargo to collect profit. And Junk Orbit is for 2 to 5 space captains, ages 10 and up, and you will be able to enjoy it over a period of about 30 to 40 minutes. MSRP is $35 when that arrives in June. Okay, so I can't say anything about Junk Orbit. Know very little about it. In fact, this is the only image floating around right now for the game. But I'm going to piggyback on this and say one of my favorite Japanese animes is Planet ES, or I've heard other people pronounce it as Planetes. It is awesome. It's about junk collectors in space, but it is really very, very scientifically correct. There's not like sound in space and stuff like that. It's an awesome series. It is very overlooked, and it is in probably my top 5. And of course, you know, it's an anime, so there is a little bit of kind of silliness, kind of comedy. But as the series goes on, it becomes much more serious. Excellent series. I highly recommend you check that out. Yes, I know it has nothing to do with Junk Orbit, but that's what popped in my head when I think about trash collection in space. Because the funny thing is, in reality, all that space debris really becomes a huge hazard for space travel. And this anime is set in the future, so there's colonies on the moon, and of course, these trash collectors have to clear the space lanes to prevent disaster. All right, so I almost opened up the show as a joke by saying, hi, I'm Jeff McAleer, and I'm the host of the Mark H. Walker Extravaganza. Because I have some Flying Pig game news. I'm doing a review for Old School Tactical Volume 2. There was another item from Tiny Battle Publishing that hit this morning that I took a peek at that I was going to share, and then they don't have the page set up yet for the game. So couldn't really do anything with that. On Friday, I will talk about it. But I thought, yeah, wow, you know, there's a lot of Mark H. Walker related stuff going on in this show. So I didn't start off with that joke simply because I didn't have a news piece for this new game from Tiny Battle. Anyway, but if you can't get enough of Mark H. Walker, and I say all the time, you've got to check out the interview I did at last year's Origins with Mark. It's a lot of fun. Anyway, if you dig Mark H. Walker and Flying Pig Games and Tiny Battle Publishing, then you're going to be pleased to know the latest issue of Yeah Magazine is arriving in April. I swear, I just do news pieces about this magazine so I can go, yeah, magazine. Anyway, here's the dope. What's the best thing about the arrival of spring? With the possible exception of warmer weather, it is, of course, the newest issue of Yeah Magazine. All right, enough of that. Yeah number 11 makes a big splash with the issue game Strike for Berlin, designed by Brian Train. If you've ever wondered what would have happened if the Red Army had managed to win the Battle of Warsaw in 1920 and then decided to take the revolution into Germany, this is the game you've got to get to the table. In addition to the game, this issue is chock full of those great gaming reviews that we all love. Brad Smith shares his take on GMT Games' second edition of Fields of Fire, while Norm Lundy takes a look at South China Sea from Compass Games. Newcomer Zachary Hamringhaus takes a deep dive into the seventh continent, and another new writer, Joshua Burgle, heads into the dungeon with a look at Gloomhaven. The solitaire game Hidden Bird's Hour gets a review from Eddie Carlson. Roger LaRoe tunes into the convention scene in Canada, and then Roger and Eddie tag team Columbia's new combat infantry with a review and an after-action report. Nick O'Neill paused through all the bits and pieces in Sid Meier's Civilization: A New Dawn, and Keith Beeson rounds out our bucket full of reviews with his in-depth look at the 25th anniversary edition of Silver Bayonet. It's 76 pages of gaming goodness that you don't want to miss. Telling you, Mark's telling you, don't miss this. You can get a discounted pre-order right now at $35. That is, of course, for the physical copy of Ya number 11, and it is going to ship in April. If I remember correctly, I think the cover price on Ya for the physical book, I think it's $40. So that would end up saving you $5. So Herman Luttman tends to have some of his designs pop up in Ya. What was it? Was it Race to the Sea? I think was the last one. Yeah. And what's going on, Mark? Huh? Mark, I know you're watching. You're going to be watching this. I know it at some point. How come you're not sending along the Ya magazines, huh? For me to do a review of, huh? What's up? What's up with that? Herman Luttman games. Come on. I mean, I think that I've only missed one or two copies of designs that Herman's done, and that's simply because I want to say the one was from Compass Games, and I guess Compass doesn't do review copies, or I don't know. I'm just teasing you, Mark. I'm just kidding. All right, so if you are a wargamer of any stripe, if you like conflict simulations of any stripe, then you know all about GMT Games. And I've got a double dose of GMT goodness, which is going to be heading our way because I've got two news pieces. That's right. And the first up is Cataclysm, a Second World War. Here's the dope. Cataclysm, a Second World War is a quick-playing game about politics and war in the 1930s and 40s, designed for 2 to 5 players. The three primary ideologies of the time contend to impose their vision of order on the world. The fascists, Germany, Italy, and Japan, seek to overthrow the status quo, which favors the democracies, France, the UK, and the United States. While the communists, the Soviet Union, look for opportunities to storm the global stage. This is not your father's panzer pusher. Cataclysm is an unapologetically card game of grand strategy. Military pieces have no factors or ratings. The capability of your forces increases as you shift the commitment of your economy from civilian to military production. Land, air, and naval forces all have their role in prosecuting war. There are no combat results tables either. Instead, battles are resolved by opposed die rolls with a limited number of modifiers, capturing the most important operational effects. The area map emphasizes political boundaries, drawing attention to strategically critical territory, encouraging players to think in broad terms of resource acquisition, control of border states, and the perception of power as the arms race plays out. There's also no sequence of play. Instead, Cataclysm relies upon a strategic chit pull system that randomizes the order of not only your actions, but also the appearance of newly built combat units. This creates riveting tension that keeps players involved at all times. Random crises events will upset plans, as well as signal the approach of the end of the turn. Not all is governed by luck. Players can use their reserve to carefully time important moves. Each side faces unique challenges managing its political, military, and economic resources in the face of constant uncertainty. Without long-term planning, any crisis can turn into chaos. The full game of Cataclysm covers the entire globe and runs from 1933 to 1950. The extensive playbook includes several additional scenarios, allowing for a range of theaters and start points. Special rules account for appeasement, the Chinese Civil War, Lend-Lease, the atomic bomb, Great Purge, Dreadnought refits, etc. Great care has been taken to allow a different but plausible alternate history to unfold with every play. Cataclysm: The Second World War is for 2 to 5 players ages 12 and up, plays in anywhere from an hour to 5 hours, depending on the scenario, and you can reserve a copy of the game right now at the P500 price of $55 from GMT. The MSRP will be $79, so it's a good opportunity to jump on board to save some money. So this does seem intriguing, I have to say. I always love big, strategic level, epic sort of games, and this strikes me as being something that should be right up my alley. Now, I do want to point out, I did say that you can save quite a bit of money, $24, if you actually order it now. This is one of the titles that GMT is going to be charging for on March 5th. So if you're not familiar with the P500, which, okay, between you and I, it's really not 500 pre-sales reserved for it. It's usually about 700 or 800 before GMT actually goes to print. But what'll happen is you put in your order, but then GMT doesn't charge you until a specific date. And then, of course, they let you know well ahead of time. So this is going to charge on March 5th. I believe that should mean we should see it probably about late April. And Robert Moffat is chiming in saying, yeah, it looks very cool looking. Well, speaking of very cool looking, also hitting stores at the same time is the newest design from Mark Herman. Yes, it's Fort Sumter: The Succession Crisis, 1860 to 1861. And of course, I've got the dope from GMT. Fort Sumter is a 2-player card-driven game portraying the 1860s succession crisis that led to the bombardment of Fort Sumter and the American Civil War. Fort Sumter is a small footprint game, about 11 by 17 inches for the mounted map, that takes approximately 25 to 40 minutes to play. The game pits a Unionist versus a Secessionist player. Each player uses the area control mechanic pioneered in my We the People design and immortalized in Twilight Struggle to place, move, and remove political capital. Of course, obviously enough, this piece is crafted and written by Mark Herman, because it's his design, not my design. The location of political capital determines who controls each of the 4 crises dimensions: political, succession, public opinion, and armaments. After 3 rounds of play, the game culminates in a final crisis confrontation to determine the winner. The heart of the Fort Sumter design is my CDG system, where you use strategy cards for their value or historic event to acquire political capital from the crisis track. Political capital tokens are used to compete for control of the 12 map spaces. Here the likes of William Lloyd Garrison, Sam Houston, Jefferson Davis, and Harriet Beecher Stowe walk on stage. while the southern states dissolve the Union. The 12 map spaces are grouped into the 4 dimensions of the crisis. You gain a victory point each round that you control a dimension's 3 spaces. For example, the armaments dimension is characterized by federal arsenals, Fort Pickens, and of course, Fort Sumter. In addition, each round you score a victory point for controlling your secret objective space. But beware, either player can score active objective spaces. At the end of the duel, Presidential Inaugurations, Round 3, a new Final Crisis mechanic drives the game to its hotly contested conclusion. Fort Sumter, the Succession Crisis, 1860 to 1861, is for 2 players, ages 10 and up, plays in around 25 to 40 minutes, and can be reserved at the P500 price right now for $29. The MSRP on this, when it does come out in stores, should be $42. So yes, another interesting title from GMT. So if you're sitting here thinking, well, should I pick this up? I got 2 words for you. Mark Herman. About all you need to know if you like card-driven games. I find it kind of interesting because I believe this is the first in a series of games that Mark Herman has planned that are all going to sort of revolve around kind of the same mechanics. And there are like one's the Berlin Airlift. Pretty interesting. So I find it kind of noteworthy that it appears that Mark Herman might be kind of turning towards smaller games. Kind of cool, kind of interesting. As opposed to, like, say, massive epic games like, oh, I don't know, Empire of the Sun. So, anyway, looks pretty unique. This is something I'll be keeping an eye out on. And, of course, I will take a guess. My pals over at GMT will be sending these along, so we will get to take a peek at these once they arrive. I'm assuming probably late April, maybe early May. All right, so moving right along, I've got one last news item, and this is also probably hitting around April, and this has really piqued my interest. And it's from Verssen Games, and it is The War of the Worlds. Here's the dope. England is under attack by strange forces from Mars. You must hurry to field forces to oppose the Martian menace before they ravage all of England and begin converting it for Martian colonization. The tripods will first destroy your cities and send refugees fleeing across the land, desperate to escape via harbors and ships. Once an area is destroyed, red weed will start to sprout up, finishing their work. As England is devastated, your production decreases and your ability to produce field guns, infantry, and cavalry also decreases. When you march your forces into the same region with a tripod wave, you get to command them in battle. Once you deploy your forces to the map, they are ready to do battle. In battle, the towering tripods will march toward your positions as your guns do their best to bring them down. While advancing, the tripods will attempt to detect your concealed guns. Once they do, they will blast them with heat rays. Each game turn brings the war closer to victory for either humans or Martians. Martians gain colonization points by destroying the land and scooping up the fleeing refugees. You gain victory points by keeping your lands healthy, destroying tripods, and evacuating the grateful refugees. The game begins with a wave of Martian tripods marching across England, as well as a Martian cylinder already embedded in the ground and preparing to construct a second wave of tripods. The War of the Worlds is a solitaire board game that puts you in command of the human forces in a desperate attempt to defend Earth against the invading Martian tripods. While you plan and carry out the human side of the war, the game system commands the Martian forces. The War of the Worlds is a low-complexity board game for gamers, science fiction fans, and anyone who likes an easy-to-play game with good decision-making. Each game only takes about an hour or so to play. Now, this was a successful Kickstarter project, and I have to be honest, flew under my radar. And I'll kind of mention that about some of the Verssen Games, why they have been kind of flying on my radar. Anyway, but there is a video that I do want to share. It's about 4 minutes long, keeping in mind that the Kickstarter has ended. So this is something that is on the horizon, but I did want to share the video with you. So let's kick back and take a peek.
War of the Worlds is a fast-paced series of solitaire games. Each boxed game features one of the world's most important cities. We are launching the series with England, France, Japan, and the United States. You can combine multiple countries to fight a worldwide war. You and your friends get to play cooperatively as the human resistance against the enemy Martian attack. One of the best aspects of the game is there are no special rules needed for solo play. The game uses the same rules with one or more players. Each game takes only 60 to 90 minutes to resolve. You start a game of War of the Worlds by selecting a scenario which determines the layout of the strategic map, where the waves of tripods are placed, as well as any cylinders containing the dreaded Martians. Every turn you gain resources to purchase forces, send them into battle, and watch with dread as the surviving Martians devastate your country. As the tripods attack your cities, refugees will flee and start looking for harbors in ships to escape the wreckage. If the tripods scoop up your refugees, they move closer to colonizing Earth. However, as you get the fleeing hordes to a harbor and safely away, you advance towards victory. Your victory condition is to destroy enough tripods and evacuate enough of your citizens. However, if the Martians ravage enough of your cities and capture enough refugees, they will emerge victorious. War of the Worlds can be played single-player or cooperatively. You can attempt to defend England, Japan, France, or New York by yourself. You can fight the Martians in one country, while friends fight the Martians in other countries. You can come to each other's aid by trading supplies, troops, guns, and cavalry on supply ships, hoping they get to your friends quickly. You engage the tripods in battle by building cannons. While in battle, the Martians draw battle cards that dictate their actions. These cards have movement, detection, and fire results. Your cannons start with some concealment, so the tripods cannot immediately fire upon them. The tension of the battle increases as they move closer and closer, raising your chance of hitting them. And finally, you open fire on them. Before the battle begins, you may purchase battle plans that will give you an edge over the tripod menace. War of the Worlds is an Arnaud de la Siega design. This is Arnaud's first DVG game design, and behind him is Dan and Kevin Verssen to make the game the best it can be.
I've got to say, that looks really, really intriguing. I do not have a specific release date or MSRP for the War of the Worlds, but I believe the Kickstarter pledge was $50, so I'm guessing an MSRP will probably be about $60. Can't say for sure. Now, one thing that I found was interesting about the War of the Worlds, at least for the Kickstarter. Now, I don't know what the game plan is for Verssen Games, but they were actually going to have 4 different editions. So one was England, one was France, one was Japan, and the other was the eastern coast of the United States. I don't know if that's still in the works, because I do know that the game did just go over its funding goal, which I think was 25,000, and the game brought in, I think, like 26 and change. So I don't know. I used to actually review a lot of the Dan Verssen games, and I really enjoy them. Phantom Leader, really dug that. Napoleon, did a review for that. Rise of the Zombies, which was kind of a card game, a zombie game, but not the kind of card game you're thinking where you had a hand of cards. It was just you were trying to make your way to this helicopter to get away. Really cool stuff. And then when I moved from Arizona back here to the Chicago area, kind of fell apart. I don't know if Dan didn't get the email talking about how I was moving or what, but I have not really heard anything from Dan Verssen Games since. So I'm going to reach out, at least so I can get some of their news that comes out, because I know there's also, I want to say, Corsair Leader is at the printers. Now, War of the Worlds is supposed to be at the printers now, from what I understand. That's why I'm saying, yes, we're probably looking maybe an April release for it. And I believe Corsair Leader is there also at the printers. And if you have not played like Phantom Leader and you dig modern air combat games, especially when you're kind of the I don't know what the term would really be, but you're actually the one who's dispatching all the different sorties and stuff like that, then you should check it out. And it's not overly complex either. All right, so that is it for the news today. So I've got a winner for one of our giveaways. Pretty simple giveaway that I did. It was for the Wreckage PDF from Hyacinth Games. This is a post-collapse miniatures game, which I took a peek at. And I've got a PDF copy of it, and it was pretty simple to win. All you need to do, I put a tweet out on Twitter. All you need to do was retweet that tweet. So the winner for Wreckage is William Von Drake. Taking a guess it's William, it's abbreviated WM. So it is William Von Drake. I am going to reach out on Twitter to ask for an email address, and I will shoot that right on out. Got some other giveaways going on. I want to dig into old school tactical in just a few minutes, so I'm not going to rehash all the giveaways. What was it? Monday show, I talked about all the different giveaways. So if you want to check out the Monday show, it's right there in the time code. What's going on? I'm giving away Shutterbug from Calliope Games, brand new copy of Talon from GMT Games, and a couple of copies of Savage Worlds of Flash Gordon PDFs, both the core book and the Kingdoms of Mongo. And if you check that out, it'll tell you how you can win. All right, so I want to jump into the mailbag, and okay, so I'm pretty transparent about stuff. So I got an interesting email from Ken in Albany, New York, and Ken wanted to know, I guess Ken is a wargamer, was curious what kind of wargame reviewers or what wargame reviewers or podcasts or channels do I normally check out? And out of those people, who would I want to sit down and play a game with? Okay. All right, well, first off, I have to say, I don't really follow other people's videos and stuff. Only time I usually pop on and try to check a video out for a game on, say, YouTube or Board Game Geek is if I'm playing something and something doesn't seem right, and I've gone through the rules and something just seems broken, or I'm sitting there wondering, why do I not like this game more than I do? So the first assumption I always have is, oh, I'm playing it wrong. So then I'll usually go and I'll take a peek at, I'll just do a search, right? It's not as if I've got specific people I go search out. But I have to admit, I have caught the Player's Aid channel a few times. And of course, there's Marco, Marco Wargamer. And I'm sure, I know there are other people out there who cover war games. Sorry, I just don't know who they would be. So I gotta say that the gang over at the Player's Aid, they seem like regular folks, pretty cool. I'm sure they would be fun to sit down, play a game, maybe have an adult beverage. Marco, on the other hand, and this might cost me some subscribers for saying this. I have met Marco once. Okay, I met Marco once at Gen Con. And I will preface this by saying everybody has a bad day. Everybody. We're human. You catch me on the wrong day, I'm probably going to be snippy and usually not at a convention though. I try to always, make sure that I am not, putting a bad face on the gaming gang or anything like that. So I've met Marco once, and personally, he was rather rude. Yeah, I'm not going to get into the whole story about it. Like I said, probably caught him on a bad day, but he sort of had this attitude where, like, his shit didn't stink kind of thing, and I was like, really? And it was funny because Elliot and I were actually playing our annual Elliot Miller, voiceofe.com, and I were playing our annual Twilight Struggle challenge at Gen Con, right? So we're sitting in this open gaming area, and I happened to notice as we were setting up, Marco was sitting at the table right behind Elliot, and I want to say he was playtesting a game with somebody. So Elliot and I were kind of setting up the Twilight Struggle and that, and the person that Marco was with got up. I guess they went to the bathroom, and then they went like to the snack bar or whatever. So I just thought, hey, I'm going to be nice. Say, hey, Marco, how you doing? Good to see you. Hey, keep up the great work, right? He just had this attitude like, I was like, seriously? Elliot didn't even really know who he was. And I was like, yeah, okay, all right, whatever. So as far as people I know in the board game, reviewing war games and that, yeah, the guys at the Player's Aid seem like they'd be cool, sit down and have a beer with. I'll take a pass on Marco. And you know what? After that happened, I made sure I never watched another one of his videos. Anyway, yeah, sorry. Just tossing that out there. All right, so yes, I can hear unsubscribe. How dare you say that about Marco? Like I said, I prefaced it by saying, hey, we're all human, right? We all have bad days. But it was kind of like, wow, dude, seriously? Tom Vassell comes over and says hi to me constantly when I see him at conventions and we chat a little bit. And he considers me the competition, right? He's always super nice to me. Anyway, whatever. All right, so as I mentioned before, I am taking a look at Old School Tactical Volume 2 from Flying Pig Games, designed by Shane Logan. So no, it is not designed by Mark H. Walker, but hey, Mark H. Walker does own Flying Pig Games. And I am going to do my best to never say Flying Frog Games. For some strange reason, sometimes when I'm talking about Flying Pig Games, I want to say Flying Frog Games. That's not going to happen. I swear, I promise it is not going to happen. All right, so Old School Tactical Volume 2 is available now. It does normally carry an MSRP of $90. You can score it for $75 over at flyingpiggames.com. So let's pop on over to the other camera here. Oh, there we go. All right, so a few things to start off with. So the game board for Volume 2 of OST is huge. It is massive. It is 30 inches by 41 inches. It is impossible for me to lay that out here on the table and get the camera far enough out to actually see the entire game board. Plus, I wanted to kind of zoom in, and I will actually zoom in a little bit to give you a better look to as far as the various counters, the terrain, things like that. So it is a huge, huge map. You know what? Let me pick this up. I will lift this up here. As you can see, it's only single-sided. It's not dual-sided. But this folds even further out. There's more over here. I'm telling you, this is a big, big map for you to have to make sure that you clear enough room on your table to be able to play. So Old School Tactical is essentially a squad level game. So your units are squads, you've got leaders, you've got support weapons, there is armor, there are soft targets such as trucks, things like that. It is 1944 to 1945. It's the Western Front, so you're looking at it's the U.S. versus the Germans, and Germany is, they're on their last legs. The Reich is on the verge of falling, which is kind of cool because you don't see a whole lot of games that are specifically aimed at that time frame. Usually, like for an example, Volume 1 of this series was 1941 to 42, I want to say. There is Volume 3 in the works from my understanding from Mark H. Walker, and it is going to be the Pacific. So I am actually looking really forward to checking that out because I think the U.S. Marines versus the Japanese, say like Guadalcanal, things like that, is pretty underrepresented in a lot of games. Combat Commander tackles the Pacific. I know. I don't recall if I've played that one or not. Anyway, so at least it's not another bulge game, is basically how I look at it. All right, so I'm going to kind of do more of a higher level look at the game. I'm not going to dig into a lot of the different mechanics. I'm not going to play through combats and stuff like that, but I am going to kind of give you an idea. I did an unboxing where I looked at a lot of stuff, but let's grab the rule book. Okay, so one of the things that I was looking at with Old School Tactical is how well can this game introduce people to wargaming? So for an example, I mention my nephew Cameron all the time. He's a member of the gang, plays a lot of the different games and stuff for review and all. And he is, I think it's kind of from me more than his parents, but he's really gotten into history because I'm always pointing out that unfortunately a lot of people his age don't really care about history because it's sort of like, oh yes, I wasn't around, so if I wasn't born, who cares? And my reply to that is, well, you should care because if history had played out differently, it's very possible you wouldn't be here. It's really into World War II and that, so I was like, okay, let's see, can I use Old School Tactical to introduce Cameron to more of a traditional hex and counter war game? And I'll tell you at the end of my review if that worked out or not. But as far as the rulebook itself, pretty standard fare as far as the layout, with the different case point, talking about the different units. Some people might be a little intimidated by this rulebook because you're really looking at about 20 pages of rules. But there is a lot of space, which you need. I'm not saying that, it's just, filler or something like that. But you'll see that there's sections about terrain, and that's a few pages talking about the different terrain, talking about the different units, giving you kind of an example of play. But all in all, 22 pages. And on the back, you will actually see there's a little bit of a turn sequence in case you just happen to have the rules sitting there. Each of the players will also receive a player aid card, which, once again, there's a turn sequence right there. So we've got a terrain chart, which all that information that was in the rule book about the terrain is pretty much contained right there in the terrain chart as well. There's off-site, or I should say off-board artillery. You've got aircraft that can be utilized, bring in airstrikes. Then we've got the combat results table. So it's broken up into infantry combat and vehicle combat. As far as vehicle combat, you are looking at hard targets, not soft targets, really. All right, so pretty easy. And I'll take a closer look at this in just a sec. Then you got a scenario book, and it is jam-packed with scenarios. There are 18 scenarios in all. What I've done here is I've actually kind of laid out the units for scenario number 6, Hunting the Hunters. The Germans are way overmatched in this, but actually the Germans are only looking to try to prevent the U.S. player from achieving the victory conditions. All right, so it's just, if you look at the scenarios, it's going to give you, okay, here's the situation. These are the special rules. How many turns is this game going to last? What is the morale rating for the troops? It's called a gut check, which I had to kind of laugh when I saw its gut check, because for years, for decades, my best friends and I have had this kind of like running gag. So whenever it's sort of like, wow, you know, you really gotta reach in within yourself to pull something off. Like, yeah, I'll give you a great example. So years ago, Elliot and I and some of our friends, we were on a dart team, and we used to go around. We used to play all these tournaments and stuff like that. And whenever, you know, it'd be like, oh man, this is getting hairy, it'd be like, it's gut check time. Gut check time. So when I saw gut check, I sort of had to laugh. So we're seeing gut check for the Germans, gut check, whoop, as I bumped the camera, gut check for the Americans. And pretty easy peasy as far as what you're looking at with setting up the scenario. So what I'm going to do here is we're taking a look at the map. When this is all unfolded into the one big board, you will have different tracks on here. So you're going to have victory point tracking. You're going to have impulse tracking. I'll talk about impulses in just a second. And you're going to have casualty tracking. All right, so let's just kind of jump over and talk about the turn sequences. Well, now. Before I jump into that, let's take a look at some of the counters and the cards. So let's zoom in. Let's see what we can get. Pop in a little bit, get a better look at some of these hexes. I'm going to pull some of the units over here so we can see them a little better, and I'll hold them up. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're talking squad level here. So for the most part, what you're looking at is each of the counters are going to represent either a squad of men, or a support weapon, or a commander or leader, I guess I should say, or a vehicle, or a piece of artillery, and so forth. So for an example, if we take a look here, this is an American Rifle Company. So the rifle company here, we see it shows a 4. So that's their firepower. Now this is firepower versus soft targets. Then we see that they've got up here is their defense. Their defensive rating is a 4. And then the big 4 shows their movement allowance is a 4. Now you see the white number there is going to be the range. So they have a range of 6 hexes. Support weapon, as an example, we've got a Browning automatic rifle. The bar. All right, come on, zoom in. There we go. Thank you. So we're seeing that it's going to improve their firepower by 1. And also has a range of 6. And of course, if you want that assigned to that squad, you're just going to put that counter with that squad. Then you've got leaders, and you'll see the leader in that circle, in that white circle, that is their kind of command radius. So any units within 1 hex of Sergeant, who do we got here? I'm trying to see. Can't tell. Yeah. All right. From this sergeant, will gain the benefits of leadership. So once again, we're seeing that he doesn't have a firepower modifier. He's just one person. But we see a defensive 4, movement 4. If you wanted to assign that sergeant to a unit, I'm just going to pop it on here. So there is some stacking. You'll have some stacking involved. Stacking 2 combat units together. All right, one of the things that I thought was pretty cool in Old School Tactical is that you'll have these cards. Okay, so we get these cards, which are going to explain exactly what each of these, not all of the units, but quite a few of the units. So we show leaders. Okay, well, movement 4, defense 4, command range. Now you'll see it says 1 to 4. Well, because there are different ranks. So here we see Captain Blake. His command range is actually 3. It says, okay, it's single person counter. May evade melee, +1 attack, +1 to hit, +1 rally, so on and so forth. These are the benefits that this leader provides. And I thought that was very cool that Flying Pig Games made these cards. They could have easily just tossed all this stuff into a book and maybe you had to flip, back and forth, so on and so forth. Here with these cards, all you got to do is when you're doing the scenario, when you're setting it up, just pull out the cards for the various different vehicles and units and so forth that you're going to be utilizing. So we have the leaders here. We see the rifle squad. Now, there are bazookas in this scenario. There are a couple of bazookas that the U.S. squads possess. And as we take a look here, it says, okay, so the high explosive firepower, whoops, as I move off there, is a 1. So, of course, that's used against soft targets. It's used against other infantry. Shows maximum range. And then we see we've got this table down here. This is going to be against armored targets, so against tanks, self-propelled artillery, things like that. So it's going to show you the range to hit and the firepower as far as armor piercing. Got an M2 mortar. Yes, these U.S. troops have a mortar with them. Once again, it's just assigned to the squad. All right, and then they also have 2 M18 Hellcats, as well as 3 M4A3 Shermans. And I'll kind of go into a little more discussion of these ranges and so on and so forth down there. Just a minute. Now, one thing you won't find is you're not going to find a lot of cards for anything that doesn't have, say, for an example, like armor piercing. So you'll have, let's grab the US. So, okay, so we're seeing like, there's a card for a heavy machine gun, because it has like, kind of a, like, well, it's a crude weapon, crude, as opposed to crude weapon. But there are no cards for light or medium machine guns. Got the engineer squad. Oh, there's a medium. Duh, I meant to say light machine guns. Airborne squad. An M8. M36. Then the Germans. Like, for an example, like the Germans have snipers. Well, the sniper doesn't have a card. There's no card in here for sniper units. So, for an example, here's the sniper who's hiding out. And we're seeing that his firepower is a 2. Oops, as I take a peek over here. I always get this weird pop-up ad at the wrong time. I don't get it. All right, so we see a firepower of 2 with a range of 8, defense of 5, movement 3. Interesting thing about the sniper is you can't stack the sniper. Sniper has to stay alone. Now, in this scenario that I kind of set up, which really isn't set up, because I've zoomed in and I'm pulling in a bunch of these counters and stuff. Plus, I would need the entire board. The Germans will have hidden units too. So as far as terrain, we've got different kinds of buildings, different level buildings. So some are better defensive positions than others. You've got stone walls, you've got hills, you've got forests, you got the brocage, you've got all these different terrains all on the terrain chart, right? But in the terrain chart, it's going to tell you, okay, how much does it cost to move through this terrain? So we've got foot, wheeled, track. Does it do anything for my defense? And one thing that I thought was very cool is the line of sight. So in old school tactical, you can have degraded line of sight. So with most games, normally what you're looking at with line of sight, it's either I can shoot at it or I can't shoot at it. Whereas with old school tactical, there's also the degrading firepower for terrain. So in effect, the terrain is kind of screening your target, but you can still fire at your target. So I thought that was pretty cool. You don't see that in a lot of games. It's either yes, you can shoot at it, or no, you can't shoot at it. Taking a look at some of the vehicles. So let's take a look here. Taking a look at one of the vehicle counters. So of course, this is one of the Shermans. So we see that it's got a firepower of 3. So that's high explosive. It's got a range of 22. It's got a movement of 6. See that red number? That red number is going to be armor piercing. That's its maximum armor piercing. So when you take a look at the card, we're going to see how range will affect the armor piercing capabilities. Then we also notice down in the lower right, as my hand moved, we see front and rear armor. So we've got a 6, that's the front, and the rear is a 5. See this kind of red right there, red corner? That's the facing. So for an example, looking at one of the hex sides, if you've got this unit sitting in this hex, this is considered the front, this is considered the rear. Then, taking another look, see we've got that 2-6. All right, come on, focus. There we go. So we got the little 2-6. So that is like the machine guns on the tank. So we see that it also has the firepower of 2 at a range of 6. Pretty easy stuff. Nothing, you know, really, wow, I got to wrap my head around all these different things. So as far as the game itself, so you're going to start off, you're going to count down your turns. So for an example, this scenario that I was talking about, the hunting the hunters, it's a 7-turn scenario. So you would actually put your turn marker on 7. And then as you progress, you're going to count down your turns. One thing that's kind of cool is that there's the possibility that when you hit that last turn, that you might actually get the opportunity to play one more turn. I thought that was kind of cool. So each player will roll a 6-sided die. You're going to add the totals together, and if it's 7 or higher, you're going to play one more turn, one last turn. All right. So let's try to get some of this stuff out of the way. I like the artwork. The artwork's really cool. One of the first things that I noticed, and I saw this at Origins last year. I want to say it was Volume 1, though, that I saw. And let's zoom out. Taking a look at the box, I was like, yeah, you know, that looked cool. It looks cool, but it wasn't like really jumping out, right? It wasn't like, wow, check this war game out, baby. But I mean, it is kind of old school. I mean, this is sort of how a lot of the old SPI box covers looked. That really might be the only old school thing about this game is really the cover. So when I first received this, I thought, oh, okay. So are we looking at something that's going to be sort of real, like old school, kind of bland, kind of boring looking? Or is this going to like pop? And in my opinion, I mean, this pops. It doesn't have, there's a few games that people are going to look at this and they're going to say, oh, well, that reminds me of, let's say, Company of Heroes, or it's going to remind them of Combat Commander. Yeah, it's going to, to me, looking at the map here, especially with the buildings and stuff, really starts to remind me of Squad Leader. And when I was in high school, we played Squad Leader. Never got into Advanced Squad Leader or anything like that. I played the original Squad Leader and really enjoyed it. When Advanced Squad Leader came out, I gotta be honest, it sort of was like, okay, I'm sort of getting to the point where this is going to be a little too in-depth for my personal taste. So Robert Moffat is chiming in asking what's on the back of the counters. Jeez, Robert, can I get to that? It's combat related, man. Grab a quick sip here. Okay. So kind of talking about how the turn sequence works. So as I was saying, you'll have your turn marker. It really does, yeah. Russell agrees. It does kind of look like Squad Leader. All right, so you're going to have your turn marker. So you're going to count down your turn. Then if you have reinforcements that are arriving, you're going to place your reinforcements. You can attach leaders to, so for an example, I was showing you the sergeant here. You can attach leaders to units. You can attach support weapons to units. That's going to be your next phase. If there's smoke that's available in the game too. Smoke lasts for a couple of turns, so I'm going to zoom this back out a little bit. There we go. So the smoke lasts for 2 turns, so if you got smoke, you flip the counter over, it'll show smoke 2. Then the next turn, anything that has smoke 2, take it right off. Then you're going to have a free rally. So you can have your units can either be just full strength, shaken, broken, or eliminated for your squads. So you're going to get a free rally roll, free gut check roll to see if you can rally each of your units. That's gonna be early in the turn as well. Then you're gonna roll for initiative. So each player is gonna roll 2 dice. High roller has initiative for that turn. So let's say, for an example, that's Germans, right? Okay. Now, here is what I find pretty cool. And I mean, it's not necessarily that it's something super unique, because there are impulses in different games. And you're looking at basically the impulses are random. So depending on the scenario, so for an example, this scenario, I had the Germans would roll 2 dice for their impulses. So we get a 6. And as I mentioned, on this board, there is a track for your impulses. So you'll be able to roll your dice, get your number of impulses, and then you're going to place your counter on that track. So the Germans get 2 dice, the Americans get 4 dice. Which is like, holy cow, right? So I just rolled a 6 for the Germans, and now I've got 20 for the US. It's like, holy blah. So, yes, it can be, it's not necessarily unbalanced, right? Because that's just an example of this scenario. Usually, each side is rolling 2 dice, or each side is rolling 3 dice. But just this scenario just happens to be that the Germans get only 2, and the Americans get 4 dice. And what you're going to do is, then you're going to start playing your turn. And starting with the player who has the initiative, you're going to spend impulse. So you can spend impulse to move a unit. You can spend impulse to fire a unit. You can move and fire as well. You can spend impulse if you're trying to rally a unit in the middle of the turn. Let's say, for an example, you really need to get a squad moving, or you need them to actually be able to kind of blunt the attack, but they're sitting there and they're broken. You can spend an impulse point to roll against their gut check to see if you can move them up to the next step. So, as I pointed out, we've got shaken, and we got broken. So shaken basically halves their movement and their firepower, and broken means they're not doing anything. They're sitting there, can't move, can't fire. Okay. Now, some of the cool stuff with the game is that with combat, you're going to take... let's move some of this stuff off. Let's say, for an example, we've got... There we go. Let's say, for an example, we've got this rifle squad, which is armed with Browning automatic rifle, and they're attacking this German squad who's in the open. They have a Panzerfaust, which isn't going to do a whole lot of good necessarily for them right now. So let's say, okay, so the American player says, okay, I'm going to spend an impulse. I'm going to fire this rifle squad. So what you're going to look at is you're going to look at the range. So we know the range is 6. Well, that's well within 6. 1, 2, 3. There's nothing as far as line of sight. And of course, line of sight is, if you notice, there's little white dots in the middle of these hexes. So you're just going to go center of one hex to center of the other hex. So we really don't have anything blocking the line of sight here. And you're going to take the firepower and you're going to combine it, right? So we've got 4 plus 1, that's 5. Then we look at the German defense. Well, German defense is 4. 4 from 5 is 1. You're going to look at the top combat result table, right? This is the infantry. And you're going to see it's -5 or less, or I should say, or greater than -5. Then we got +7 or greater here. So we're on a +1. And then you would be looking at, okay, so are they adjacent? Are they in melee? Degraded line of sight? Shaken? Intensive fire? Okay, no, we're cool. So we're looking at a +1. But then we get some die roll modifiers as well. So you're looking at modifying firepower as well as the die rolls. So what you would do is, we're at a 1. Let's say we don't have any other modifications. We're going to roll 2 dice. We get a 6. And we're going to see right here, +1 says S. So that attack would have shaken the German rifle squad. Easy peasy. Super easy. So as I mentioned before, you can have a unit eliminated. You can have them actually take casualties. And Robert had asked, well, what's on the back of the counters? Well, with the infantry, we flip it over and we see that there's a red circle. That's their reduced. So there is step reduction in this as far as the infantry. So if they take a casualty, you would flip it over. You're going to reduce it to 1 step. Simple enough. If it was eliminated, well, guess what? It's eliminated from the game. Armored combat is a little bit different. Armored combat, you're going to be, it's kind of a 2-step process. So say, for an example, we've got the, I don't know, where did I grab that from? All right, go over here. Over here. Actually, let's do a little further away. I just want to kind of give you an example. So one of the reasons why this map is so big, why this board is so big, is because of the scale, right? So this is a single vehicle. This is just a single vehicle here. you got to have a bigger, you got to have a bigger map. Let's get that in the shot. You got to have a bigger map to be able to represent the ranges of these tanks and anti-tank guns and things like that. So for an example here, we're showing that, well, got a range of 22. It's got an armor piercing factor of 10. Now we're going to take a look at this card here. We're going to count out the range. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're looking at 6. Wow, that is pretty close range, right? So we're going to need to hit a 6 on 2 dice. You're going to roll 2 dice to hit. And we see that the firepower is 10. So we take a look here at the target Hertzer, right there. Now if we take a peek here, we see that the armor factor to the front, because right, he's firing at the front, because it's red, that's considered in the front armor, it's an 8. Right, so then you're gonna roll, okay, so I need to roll 6 or better on 2 dice to hit. All right, we get a 7. Boom, that's a hit. Now we're gonna take a look at the firepower. We're gonna take a look down here at the vehicle combat table. We're gonna take a look at the +2, right? Because we had a armor piercing of 10. We got the defense, the armor defense of 8, so we got a +2. And we're assuming we've got no other modifiers, right? You're gonna roll your 2 dice. We get an 8 on a +2. Ah, rats. Rats. I was hoping for an X because that'd be eliminated. Just missed it. So this would be damaged, so you're gonna take a damaged counter. You're gonna show that this is damaged, and it would also be shaken. So we would see that unit would be shaken. Now, when a vehicle takes the hit, when they get that X, because there is no step reduction for the vehicles, it's going to become a wreck. And you're going to replace that. Now that's going to become a new terrain feature. It's a wreck. So pretty simply done. And then you're just going to continue along. You're going to go back and forth with your impulses. Now, one of the things that you want to do too is, excuse me, I'll give you an example. So let's say we got these guys with the Browning automatic rifle. Let's say we just got another rifle squad here. So what you can do is you can actually spend 2 impulse to do group movement. And you can take 2 units. Now they could be stacked, they could be adjacent, and you would move them as one. You can also group fire. So, and once again, you would be spending 2 impulses to be able to fire. So when they've fired, or if they've moved, let's say that these 2 squads did fire, and you grouped it together, right? So now you're firing at, let's say, one target. Let's say the target was these guys here. You've grouped it together, so now you're looking at its 4, 5, 9 firepower, which is what you need to do in this game. You really need to sit there and you need to mass your firepower. And when you start doing that, you are going to start ripping apart your targets. So I recommend trying to do that whenever you have an opportunity to group fire together. So as opposed to, well, it would have been a +1. Once again, we're just pretending there's no additional modifiers here. Now, if you grouped fire, now you're looking at, wow, it's a +5. Now you're looking at, boy, those are some really good combat results there. So that's one of the things that I point out. Cameron had a little hard time figuring out, because he was like, okay, well, 1 impulse and then I fire. Something else that I think is pretty cool too is you'll mark them as fired. But you can actually use these units to fire again if you want. You could have them fire again during this turn by spending impulse. And I thought that was pretty cool because a lot of times in many games it's like, okay, your unit only gets to fire once per turn. No, you can fire more than one time with your units by spending your impulses. Now, eventually, I want to say it's the third time that you were to fire. The third time you were to fire, then you become shaken. So that unit becomes shaken because what they're doing, it's like, pour it on, boys, give it to them. And I thought that's pretty cool how you can spend your impulse points to continually, repeatedly fire. Now, of course, units can only move once. That's why, of course, you're going to pop down that they moved. You can move and fire. And of course, if you move and fire, then there's going to be a negative modifier to your firepower because you're not sitting there, waiting to get the best shot. There's also opportunity fire, which a game like this, which is, squad level, if it didn't have opportunity fire, then you'd have to scratch your head and think, okay, what were you guys thinking? So opportunity fire is pretty simple. When it's the other player's impulse and they're moving, you can say, okay, hold on. I'm going to spend an impulse point and I'm going to opportunity fire. So you spend your impulse point, you're going to roll your combat dice, and then depending on the results, that other player is going to be able to finish their move, or maybe you've broken their unit, or maybe they're shaken. So I think it's pretty cool how there's the opportunity fire, and it's really quick and easy. You're just simply saying, okay, I'm going to hop in here and I'm going to spend one of my impulse points to do so. Once each side has exhausted their impulse points, then of course you're going to move into kind of the end phase. So you've got melee, so you've got assaults. You can have units get into close combat with other units. Pretty deadly, gotta say. The close assault, the melee is pretty deadly stuff. Then there's a bit of cleanup. You're gonna go and you're gonna remove the like different markers that there aren't a ton of markers that are floating around, but you'll have a bit of a cleanup. Then you get your victory points. There's a couple of things that I thought are pretty cool with the way this works too. So remember the US in this scenario, they get those 4 dice they get to roll for their impulses. Well, as each side starts to take casualties, their morale level really doesn't change. Their gut check really doesn't change. But what does change is the number of impulses that they get. And for an example, like a full squad, right? Full squad eliminated, that's counted as 2 casualty points. A vehicle eliminated, it's 2 casualty points. A step reduction is 1 casualty point. And as you're going along, as you're, inflicting casualties on your opponent, you want to make sure that you're keeping track on that casualty track, because for every 5 points of casualties, the player is going to lose 1 impulse. So for an example, in this scenario, if the US had lost 15 casualty points, or if they've acquired, I guess we would say, 15 casualty points, they're going to lose 3 impulses. Now, the minimum you can have in a turn is 1 impulse. You can never be brought lower than 1 impulse. Speaking of that, it is entirely possible that, let's say both players are rolling 3 dice for their impulses. It is entirely possible that one player is going to receive a 3 on their roll, and another player is going to get 18 on their roll. It happens, doesn't happen a lot. That might bother people, that in essence, one side really kind of gets shafted, only has 3 impulses, and the other side has 18 impulses. The way I sort of look at it is that it's not as if command control is like 100% on the money every moment in a battlefield situation. There are command breakdowns. It happens. It's the fortunes of war, right? That's sort of how I kind of look at that, is as the fortunes of war. Speaking of fortunes of war, there's also a deck of luck cards, which I thought was kind of funny. I thought that was kind of bland, right? That's pretty bland. Luck. But these are pretty interesting. So each player is going to get a single luck card, randomly drawn, to begin the game. So each player is going to have one luck card that is going to be usable sometime during the game. So for an example, let's say this was the German. So I have experimental ammo. Add +4 to your firepower to any single attack. May not be used by a sniper with an OBA strikes or in a melee. So this is a one and done. This is a one-shot thing. I would get to use this once and it's done. Say the US player got a mortar attack. Launch a mortar attack on the enemy. There are some that are vehicle related. So your options are either don't do anything with the luck deck and just simply have somebody, if you draw a card and it's vehicle related and there are no vehicles, well, it's not luck, it's SOL. But what I recommend is if you're not playing with vehicles, just go through the deck, take the vehicle cards out. That way somebody's got something. None of these are big game changers. It's just kind of cool little like critical hit, or you give a unit 3 extra movement points, and it's just a one and done. It's you kind of keep it in your in your back pocket until it's like, okay, this is gonna make a difference in this turn, in this combat, what have you. So I thought that was kind of cool too. So all right, so you're keeping track of your casualty points. There is a phase in the turn where you're going to score victory points, and the victory points it can kind of vary what your objectives are. Like for an example, I was saying that, okay, so in this scenario here, the Germans are just trying to deny the Americans victory. So here, for an example, it says victory in hunting the hunters. Americans win at the end of any turn. Both Hetzers are destroyed and all German squads are shaken, broken. German wins by denying American victory through a period of 7 turns. Plus, don't forget, you might actually get an 8th turn out of the whole thing. But you'll have other scenarios where one of the sides has to occupy a hex. It's an important objective that they need to get. And then, of course, there's the victory points. What I recommend is score your victory points as you're playing. It's a little easier to score the victory points as you're playing the game as opposed to waiting until you get to that phase to score the victory points. All right, so once you've gone through your turn, everybody's exhausted those impulse points, and you've done the victory points, and you've kind of cleared up your markers, your informational markers. Then it's the end of the turn. Move on to the next turn. You're going to roll for your initiative. You're going to roll for your impulses. And you just, continue the process until one side achieves victory or the time limit runs out on the turns. So, the way I kind of look at this, and I'll be the first to admit that I am not, I wouldn't say I'm the most well-versed in war games out there. I play war games, yeah. I've never played a Compass game. I've never played anything from Worthington. A lot of my wargaming experience does come from old Avalon Hill titles. And, of course, there's the, what do we got floating around here? Why did I say Company of Heroes? That's a PC game. Conflict of Heroes. What else? Oh, Combat Commander I've played. So it's not as if I've got tons and tons of squad level combat experience. A lot of the war games I've played have always been, higher level strategic kind of games. I really dig old school tactical because of quite a few different things. Now, first off, I have to point out that this game, the combat's pretty lethal, especially when you start grouping your firepower together. It can be really lethal. I dig that. I like that. I like to see units getting eliminated in a war game as opposed to, oh, look, these guys are pinned again. Oh, look, I couldn't rally them. They're still pinned. Oh, they're getting fired at again. And they're pinned. I think a lot of people out there who play a lot of war games understand where I'm coming from. So I dig the lethality, I guess I would say, of old school tactical. Let's switch cameras here. Let me grab a quick sip. Okay. Obviously, folks who are looking for, more in-depth tactical detail, I guess I would say, as far as the infantry combat, sure, of course, Advanced Squad Leader is going to be something more in their range. Just like somebody who's looking at, wow, I really want to get more into the armor on armor, the armored fighting vehicles, blasting away at each other. Yes, of course, something like James M. Day's Panzer series is obviously going to model that in much more detail than old school tactical. That being said, I think as a whole, old school tactical does a really, really good job of giving you the flavor, giving you the feel of Western Front combat during World War II. Of course, is it going to be like, super deep dive into all these different things? No. But there's a lot of different stuff. There's satchel charges. There's, like I said, there's smoke. There's offboard artillery. There's all different small little variants that are added into the game. And one of the cool things, too, with old school tactical is you ramp up, I should say. I think I said ramp up as you play. So the first scenario is just kind of getting used to sort of the, just the infantry, some of the infantry rules. All right. And then you play a few scenarios and then, okay, now you're starting to see, okay, now they're adding in artillery. Oh, and now we've got the armored vehicles. Oh, now we've got transport vehicles, which are soft targets. But now we get to transport our rifle squads around. There's stuff where your rifle squads can use armored vehicles as rolling cover. So there's a lot in the game. It's just not all thrown at you, everything in the kitchen sink, tossed in your lap for your first game. And I appreciate that a lot. So as I had said, the way I kind of looked at this more than anything else is, yes, and Robert points out, yep, there's larger counters. Yeah, the counters aren't as big and chunky as, say, Night of Man or 65, but they still are a bit larger than your standard wargaming counters. Whereas if you see people playing some of those big, epic, mega games, and they've got the stacks of counters and they're using tweezers to move the stacks around. No, these are nice sized counters. Like I said, not as big and chunky as some of the other Flying Pig games, but still bigger than, say, Squad Leader, the old traditional Avalon Hill sorts of games or SPI games. So anyway, so I like the fact that it was very easy to get my nephew Cameron involved and playing. Now, did he grasp everything right off the bat? No. Did I grasp everything right off the bat? No. So, it's like any new game. You're kind of getting your feet wet with it. Now, of course, a lot of the concepts, yeah, there's some tried and true wargaming concepts that are involved in this. Trying to pin down your targets, trying to shake them or break them, flanking, all that stuff, as I guess the tagline for the game over on Flying Pig Games is sort of along the lines of, if it works on the battlefield, it's going to work in this game. So I really, really dig that it's easily accessible. There are loads and loads of scenarios. The artwork's very cool. The rules could have been presented a little bit clearer. And I think for people just being introduced to Wargames 2, the rulebook's going to throw them a little bit because it's not laid out like other board game rules kind of are. Although I'm used to the old Avalon Hill stuff, so it didn't throw me. But I can see where people would be like, okay, these rules come across as being more difficult to figure out than they really are. There's a lot of meat on its bones, but it's not overwhelming. I like how with armored combat, you do have the kind of two-step. Okay, do I hit? And then if I hit, do we damage? Do we do any damage to it? It's going to be sitting there with tanks that just can't punch through somebody else's armor. Yeah, you could hit them all day. You're not going to knock them out. You might shake them, but you're not going to knock them out. So I really dug that. The only thing that I really thought was, I guess, a knock I would have on it is the board. The board is very large. I would have liked to have seen having a modular board. I believe, now I don't know for sure, but I believe the first volume of Old School Tactical actually had 2 maps. So I don't know if it was 2 maps or if it was double-sided. This is 1 map. It is big, but it is one side. And of course, it does have the terrain key on it, and it's got the different tracks for victory points and impulses and casualties and so on. What I would have liked to have seen would have been a modular board, because it would have given you way more variety with how you set up your maps. And then those tracks could have been placed on like another sheet like this, where you could have placed it next to the board or whatever modular boards that you would be utilizing. Because the thing is, you'll have some of the smaller scenarios, you're still using this big board. And it would be a lot easier to break this out, to introduce the people on a small little table, little card table or something like that, and go to town on it, as opposed to this big, massive board that you have to unfold every time you play. And then you may only be playing on one small square of that board. So that's the only knock. That's really the only knock I had. Would have liked to have seen a little more variety. Maybe even have seen some hexagonal counters with different terrains, so you could have shaken up the board. Even if they went with still with the big board, just kind of shake it up a little bit. Anyway, there's loads of scenarios, lots of fun, easy to get into. Start with some of these early scenarios. Once you get a hang on how the game operates, you can knock out a scenario about an hour, maybe 90 minutes when you're first starting. Now, some of the later, more detailed or bigger scenarios are going to take you a few hours. But we played 3 different scenarios and never did it really like super bogged down. And as I mentioned before, Cameron, there were a couple of times where he's like, I don't know. And it's like, okay, I told you before, you got to mass your firepower. Because he was like, I don't understand how you keep blowing all my guys away, but, every time I'm shooting at you, either nothing happens or all I'm doing is just, shaking your troops. And then you just rally them and then they're fine. So, anyway, but plays really quick, enjoyed it a lot. On a scale of 1 to 10, even dinging it a little bit for the board, I'm giving Old School Tactical Volume 2 a 9 out of 10. Now, if you are an experienced veteran of wargaming, you may not score it so high. You may have your own personal favorites that you dig. For an example, like Panzer. Like if you're a big, tank-on-tank sort of person, Panzer is probably going to be more your flavor. Whereas, if you're looking, oh, wow, I really want to simulate all the variances and all the possibilities of infantry combat, this may not necessarily be right up your alley. But if you are looking for a very, very solid war game in late period Western Front, which isn't like highly represented in a lot of titles, and you like a good back and forth with the impulses, then most definitely you are going to want to check out Old School Tactical Volume 2. All right, so wait a second. So let's see. There was a question up here. Thought I saw something about 65. Let's see if I can go roll back. All right. This is definitely a lean toward the more serious wargamers. 65 has that Night of Man fun factor for the normal gamer type thing going on. That is from Robert. It does. 65, the way I sort of looked at it as, okay, so how I sort of look at 65 is Vietnam's, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, Vietnam is sort of tough to kind of game, to simulate, especially when you go a little later. Especially when the worm starts to turn and the whole public perception of the war sours for a variety of different reasons. Less commitment from the troops, I guess we would say, in some respects. So 65 is earlier on. To me, 65, I like 65 because it is one of the rare Vietnam games where, as the Vietnamese player, whether you're playing the NVA or Viet Cong, actually has a chance. And I have seen other, years ago, of course, other Vietnam games where, especially kind of more tactical level, that if you're the Vietnam player, it's like there's no way you can win. It's impossible to win. That's sort of like, well, you know, if that was the case, which granted, of course, the U.S. did win on the battlefield, didn't do so well anywhere else. But anyway, as far as 65, yeah, I think it's got meat to it. It does have meat to it. It's a cool game, but it does have a little bit of a beer and pretzels feel to it. And I don't want to say that to make it sound like 65 is, you know, just real disposable mechanics or anything like that. No, it's very cool. I really like what they did with, I want to say Mark designed that one. I want to say it's a Mark H. Walker design. I like how he took the card-driven resolution of everything from Night of Man and put it into 65. All right. So anyway, hey, wow, pretty long show. Almost an hour 40 today. Pretty funny. I'm like, yeah, well, I'm not going to go like deep dive into Old School Tactical, but I'm still going to spend about an hour talking about it anyway. So I guess it'd probably been easier for just play out a turn, but it would have been impossible because I can't unfold this board. I mean, it's that big, and I got a table here. The table just isn't big enough. Or I would have been sitting like this. I'd had the board all the way out here. I've been like, yeah, so anyway. All right, so that is Wargame Wednesday for the last day of February 28th. In case you're wondering what's cooking for the rest of the week, and I know Robert's like, yeah, that's it. Hey, Robert, you're very, very welcome. I know Robert Moffat was really looking forward to taking a look at Old School Tactical today. Like, he kept commenting on other videos. Hey, you know, this video's okay, but you know, I'm waiting for Wednesday, man. Anyway, speaking about what's cooking for the rest of the week, I am going to review Hero Realms from White Wizard Games tomorrow. I'm going to talk about the core game here, and I'm also going to talk about the special character decks as well. Give you a hint, we played it quite a bit over the weekend, so I don't play crap repeatedly. That's going to kind of give you a hint. Then on Friday, I am going to, for Family Fun Friday, I just got this day before yesterday, from Daily Magic Games Songbirds. So it looks kind of cool. Strangely enough, review every day this week, except for Friday. I swear, I thought I was going to do fewer reviews doing a daily show. I'm doing way more reviews. I think over the last 30 days, I had to have averaged, well, I should say last 30 shows. It's got to be about 15 or 20 of those are reviews. So, and I'm not complaining, don't get me wrong. It's just, wow, A lot of reviews. So, anyway, when you're not watching the Daily Dope, be sure to swing over to thegaminggang.com for the latest in gaming news, reviews, comics, movies, TV. You know the drill by now. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. I will be back tomorrow. Once again, I am Jeff McAleer. I appreciate you subscribing, thumbing up the videos. And until tomorrow, enjoy the rest of your hump day. Once again.